Hey everybody, Blake from CommonSenseWallet.com here, and today we are going to be taking a look at everything you need to know about emergency funds. And in my opinion, this is really everything that's important for you to know about emergency funds. And if you're interested in checking out this article, it's in the link in the description if you want to go ahead and read it for yourself at your own pace. Okay, but emergency funds they're one of my favorite things, and every single successful person has an emergency fund. They have put that into their financial lives. They made sure that they had an emergency fund because it's literally the foundation. If you don't have that, it's very, very hard to succeed in life because you need one of those for your financial life to be in a good place. So, in case you don't know, what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is money that you have set aside in case there's an emergency. So you would have these funds completely separate from the rest of your money. The only time you are supposed to draw from this fund is when there is an actual emergency. And in an emergency, just in case, because some people will consider emergencies different things. So an emergency in this situation is defined as an unexpected expense. And I really do mean unexpected when I say unexpected expense, because a lot of times people will create an emergency fund and then they'll just pull from it regularly for reasons that are not really unexpected. And to do this, it completely negates the purpose of having an emergency fund. So if you can reasonably expect an expense, then you should be saving for that expense separately. A lot of people, I've seen it a lot, where people will create an emergency fund and then they start pulling from it for things that they kind of pretend are unexpected expenses, but they're really not unexpected. And if when you do that, you might as well not have an emergency fund because it's not really serving its purpose. And let me quickly give you an example of an expected and unexpected expense. An expected expense would be getting an oil change on your car. You know that you're going to have to do that, every so many miles or so many months. So you know that you need to be saving for that. An unexpected expense would be if your engine fails in your car. Assuming you don't have like a beater or something like that, you wouldn't expect your engine to fail. So you probably wouldn't have seen that coming, and you would need to use your emergency fund to purchase a new vehicle or to fix your current one, and that's why the emergency fund is there in the first place. And so I know we kind of touched on it, but why do you need an emergency fund? And as I mentioned, emergency funds they are very essential. Without one, you are going to be opening yourself up to a lot of risk. If you have funds set aside for an actual emergency, you aren't scrambling to find a way to pay for things when they happen. You've already kind of got that money there saved for you backing you up. You can think of an emergency fund as a safety net. Without it, one bad thing can happen and your whole financial life falls apart. If you don't have an emergency fund, then a minor inconvenience will turn into this horrible, disastrous thing that ruins your life, essentially. Okay, now how much should you have in an emergency fund? And this is kind of a debated topic. Most people will recommend you keep between 3 and 6 months worth of expenses in your emergency fund. And to be quite honest, I think it is smarter to go ahead and have 6 months worth of expenses, or closer to that 6 months rather than the 3 months. And just me personally, I'm very, very risk adverse person. And keeping 6 months of expenses feels a lot safer than only having 3 months. For example, if you spend $2,000 a month on all your expenses, you would need around $10,000 to have a $6-month emergency fund. So just kind of an idea of how much you would have to put in there. And on this article here, we have a little thing that can help you calculate what your emergency fund needs to be. But I would definitely say go towards that 6-month mark. A lot of people will disagree with that and say, 3 months is just enough. But with everything that's been going on in the world lately, I just think it's better to be safe than sorry, in my opinion. Should you have more than 6 months worth of expenses saved? No. It is very unlikely that you'll need any more money saved up to deal with an unexpected expense. Anything after 6 months should be invested somewhere rather than saved. Your emergency fund is not going to be growing very quickly, so by having more money in it, you are just missing out on better investments. And what I mean by growing quickly here is that your emergency fund shouldn't be invested, as we're about to talk about down here. Your emergency fund shouldn't be invested. So once you hit about that 6-month mark, it's going to be unlikely that something's going to come up where you need to pay, 8 months worth of expenses or a year. That's just very, very unlikely. So it's not really worth missing out on those investments for when you could be investing that money and growing it for the future rather than just having to sit somewhere, basically just doing nothing. And if you are going through a big life event, you could possibly be in a situation where you'd want to save more money in your emergency fund, but 99% of the time, your current funds will be enough. Also, don't forget to reevaluate your emergency fund as your monthly expenses change. Yeah, so make sure. What I'm saying here with if you're going through like a big life event, like what I like to think of is like if you're moving, like let's say you're like moving cross country or something like that. That's just kind of what I kind of thought about when I wrote this. Maybe something happens and they lose your stuff, and maybe you did have insurance on it and you're going to get that money back, but you don't get it back right away. Something like that. Maybe you just want to throw a couple extra $1,000 in there. So just to feel a little better, because I know you're in it's kind of a big situation there, and you want to be very prepared, or you might be living in a house without any furniture for a little bit, or maybe your current emergency fund won't necessarily cover everything in that situation, but most of the time that's really not going to matter. It's kind of just an extra ease of peace of mind, and kind of how I like to do it, but it's really up to you. And don't forget to evaluate your emergency fund as your monthly expenses change. So maybe you get a raise and you decide you're making a lot more money now. So maybe you bought a bigger house and you have a bigger mortgage. Make sure that you're reevaluating your emergency fund month to month as things change, so that you don't have too little or too much in there. Okay, now should you be investing that money instead? And like we said up here, emergency funds, I said don't invest them because, well, let's look at it. Even though I don't think it's wise to have an excess amount of money in your emergency fund, it also isn't smart to invest your full emergency fund. I realize that most people will have over 10 grand in their emergency fund, and that is a lot of money. However, if you're putting that money into the stock market or a similar investment, you could potentially lose some or all of it. How bad would it be if you had lost a big chunk of your emergency fund and an emergency came up? I personally like to think of an emergency fund as an investment. It may not gain a lot of interest, but it does protect me. It allows me to safely invest my other money without ever having to worry that I will need to pay for something with that, with my actual investments. My investments and I are always safe. So an emergency fund, and this is kind of the purpose of an emergency fund. It's like this buffer room. Some people refer to it as more of like insurance, I guess, but I kind of like to refer to it as an investment, so people don't feel like they are losing out on investing, because I see so many people say like, oh, my emergency fund, I got 15 grand in an emergency fund, and if I put that into, the S&P 500, then over the course of X amount of years, it'll be this much, but if I keep it in, a savings account, it's going to earn next to nothing. And I feel that. I really feel that because, I really see the value of compound interest and investing and all that. But you got to think, if you don't have that, your investment's always going to come back in a place like the stock market. But if you are in a situation where you need that money and your investment's down, you basically paid more for that than you would have initially. So it's usually never worth it in those situations. And I like to think, it's just that protection, that peace of mind. Okay, where should you keep your emergency fund? Most people typically keep their emergency fund in a separate savings account. The main rule is to keep it somewhere safe and by itself. You don't want to be mixing any other money with it, including other savings. You also don't want to put it anywhere it could go down in value. Some good places to put your emergency fund are in a high-yield savings account, a money market account, or a checking account that earns high interest. You aren't going to be earning a crazy amount of interest on it anywhere, but of course every little bit helps. And so the biggest places you can put it are, I would definitely recommend try to not just put it in a regular savings account or checking account. Try to put it in a place where it is going to earn a little more money, but just don't put it anywhere where it could go down in value. High yield savings accounts are awesome. Right as of right now, they're not honestly, the amount of interest they're earning isn't that much, but still, it's way better than, you know, the small amount you're earning in other places. Money market accounts can be great, as long as they're not tied to the stock market, which as I've seen, and when I worked as a loan officer, ours was not. So checking account, some checking accounts can earn really high interest. Obviously, you're not going to really use it like a normal checking account, but you can earn like 2% or something occasionally. So yeah. Okay. Should you pay off debt or build an emergency fund first? Sometimes it is recommended that you pay off your debt before you build up your emergency fund. If you guys know who Dave Ramsey is, he specifically recommends that you save only $1,000 for your emergency fund, and you pay off all your debt besides your house. And then, after you've paid off all your debt besides your house, you go ahead and you've saved that 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And just to be quite honest, I love Dave Ramsey. I think he's got a lot of good advice, but I personally disagree with that. I don't think it's really is great. I do think it's great to pay off debt quickly. The more debt you have, the harder it can be to grow wealth. However, not having enough money in your emergency fund can be very risky. Depending on your situation, it could take a while for you to pay off your debt, and that could leave you very vulnerable. And now, I definitely think you should attack that debt and pay it off quick. I'm not saying that, but I think you need to get that 3 months in there before you go for your debt tackling. You can do 3 months, I think, and be okay. You can even do the 6 months. I wouldn't be against you doing the full 6 months, but I personally just don't think $1,000 just isn't enough nowadays to really cover a whole lot. It's not going to buy you a new car or fix your current car potentially. I've had car bills over $1,000 for sure when I've had to. So if you see what I'm saying there, it's just like it feels risky to me. And in my opinion, the whole point of an emergency fund is to not have any risk, essentially. And you could potentially get into more debt if you only have that $1,000. So go ahead and save your 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and then go back and start attacking that debt crazy. And how can you save for an emergency fund? It can seem like a daunting task to save half of a year's worth of expenses. I promise it can be done. You'll just have to focus on saving money as quickly as possible. The quicker you can get your emergency fund funded, the safer you will be. In order to save for an emergency fund, you'll probably need to cut back on a lot for the next few months. I wrote a post about how I was able to save half my income. Yes, I have saved half my income on a fairly small, probably for a lot of you, it's like about four grand essentially a month. It was really less than that, and I was saving about half of that. You could check out that post if you want to. Go to the description, click on this post, and go through it. There's a lot of helpful resources here. Another thing I do mention is that saving this kind of money can take some time. Be patient, and don't lose focus on your goal. Once it is all said and done, you'll be glad that you've put that money away. And yeah, if you go for the full 6 months, it can be a bit daunting, especially if you're paying, car payments and stuff like that. But just kind of stay focused on that goal. Remember why you're doing it and where you'll be. And cut back on a lot of stuff. I do have an article on here as well about how you can cut back and everything on some unnecessary spending. So yeah, check that out, and I will put some cards up in the description here to help you, give you some other resources of videos I've made on how to save money and stuff like that. Because it's definitely, listen, it is so worth it. If you want to get your finances on track, an emergency fund is the way to do it, and you need to start now. Okay. And the last little bit here, emergency fund equals freedom. Having an emergency fund means having more freedom. You have the freedom to not worry about what could happen. If anything were to happen, you have the money there. It's a great feeling, and one that allows you to live a much more relaxed life. Having an emergency fund means no longer living paycheck to paycheck. It means focusing on the here and now, not the what ifs. And I'm serious about this. Once you get an emergency fund, it's like a weight is off your shoulders. You need one, and you need to start your journey to get an emergency fund today. And seriously, an emergency fund is just like a weight off your shoulders. So definitely, if you're starting your financial journey, that's really awesome, and I'm glad that you're here and you were able to learn a little bit about emergency funds. Check out my other videos and go to commonsensewallet.com. We have a lot of resources there for you, or you can just leave a comment in the description. Let me know what's going on. Let me know if there's any questions you have, and I definitely try to answer all the questions. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.